Earth Day 2021. Something exceptional happened. President Biden, the newly elected President of the United States, convened in a virtual summit 40 leaders to talk about climate change and urge for more action. The United States, for example, pledges to reduce by between 50 and 52% the amount of carbon emission that they're emitting compared to the level that was there for 2005. Each of the other 40 leaders that talk at the summit mentioned about the pledges that each of the countries were making, or at least the action that they put forward to reduce the rejection of carbon emission in the atmosphere. Did you know that among those 40 leaders, we had 5 that were African? Yes, 5. Do you have an idea what those African leaders said? Or more importantly, what do they want? This is what I'm going to be covering in this video, so you clearly want to listen. Hello again, and welcome to Renewables in Africa. I am Tony Tio, the founder and the CEO of Renewables in Africa, your Africa clean energy champion. Our mission is very simple. We want to make sure that we can demystify the renewable energy sector for you so that it makes it easier for you to take the proper action, whether you are an investor, a practitioner, or simply a renewable energy enthusiast or a member of the society. And we need you to work with us. So how can you do it? Very simple. You simply need to like this video, to comment, and to get ready every time we release a new video every Sunday. How do you do it? Simply by pressing the bell notification. And every week, because you do it, one of you going to have the chance to get a 1 hour of free advice with me. And it will be my pleasure to make sure that I can provide the advice you need to take your career further or your project further. Isn't it cool? Great. I'll talk to you soon. First of all, why at all are we talking about that? I'm sure some of you are asking the question. My response is very simple. You want to understand why those 5 African leaders have been chosen. What are they representing? And also, more importantly, what is the Africa position towards the fight against climate change? Only then you are able to make the connection with the regulation that are impacting the project you are working on, and also can give you an idea how you can tackle and enter the market if this is what you are looking for. Does it make more sense? Excellent. Now let's jump into it right away. The first country we want to talk about is the Democratic Republic of Congo. Why? Simply because their president, Mr. Tshisekedi, is the current chairperson of the African Union, a very important role if you want to be forging Africa consensus ahead of COP26. And it's also because Congo is holding the largest part of the Congo Basin rainforest, the second largest rainforest, important for mitigation measures, right? And beside that, Congo has even more assets. They have the Cuvette Central peatland, which at the moment is seemingly storing more than 30 billion of tons of carbons. And actually, if only 1/3 of this capacity is released in the atmosphere, that's enough to increase the temperature by about 5 degrees. So with all these assets, it's only fair that Mr. Tshisekedi will be asking for more financial support to implement climate adaptation and mitigations measures for his country, but also on behalf of the African continent as a chairperson. The second country we want to talk about is Gabon. The president, Mr. Ali Bongo, is the current head of African group of negotiators. When we were talking about COP26 and Africa consensus, this is the guy who's going to be bringing head together to make sure that we can come up with one Africa position. And also, Gabon is the second most forested countries, just behind Suriname. 88% of their territory is rainforest. So as you can see, a very important country for the whole world. And also, Gabon became in 2019 the first African country that was paid by an international fund from Norway to preserve its forests. So Mr. Adi Bongo is very pleased to make sure that he can remind that to the whole audience. The third country we want to cover is Kenya. The country is currently a non-permanent member of the UN Security Council for 2021-2022, so a very important role. The president, Mr. Uhuru Kenyatta, is asking for a unified approach to security, development, and economic challenges posed by climate change. And we can understand him because Kenya is only producing 0.1% of the global CO2 emission and is the seventh producer of geothermal. However, they're facing regular and cyclical period of drought and flooding, and that's tremendously affecting the economy. In fact, when you're looking at the GDP, the annual GDP, it has dropped between 2 to 2.4% as a result of those challenges. So, Mr. Kenyatta is asking for support for an integrated climate initiative. And that's actually what he has embedded in the Kenya Big Four Agenda and Vision 2030 that he put forward in 2008. And the Big Four are covering food security, affordable housing, manufacturing, and healthcare. Those problems are quite common to many countries in Africa. And Mr. Uhuru Kenyatta is using his voice to make sure that he can put that forward for the whole audience, the global audience, to pay attention to it. The fourth country I want to cover is Nigeria. Besides being the largest economy in the continent, the country is also the largest producer of oil and gas, as we all know. This is the reason why Mr. Buhari, the president, is clearly asking for a strong CO2 commitment and transparency from all the oil and gas producers in the world. Mr. Buhari also wants to raise attention to the climate security because Nigeria has been facing issues with groups like Boko Haram and others, both in the country and the whole Sahel region. So taking attention and paying attention to climate security is very important for the country. Nigeria is also experiencing a severe competition between land and water, and this is driven by the changing climatic condition. This is as a result fueling tension between the diverse ethnic group. Again, this is not only specific to Nigeria, but this is an opportunity to raise these issues so that everybody is properly aware of. And also, agriculture is the largest sector across the continent and is clearly also making 20% of Nigeria GDP, employing two-thirds of the workforce. And because of climate change, the sector is also struggling. Why? Because of water stress and also lack of land. So this is a reason we clearly want to be paying attention to that because those are the results of climate change, what is having clearly on the field. The last country I want to cover is South Africa. South Africa is the 13th biggest emitter of carbon emissions and clearly Africa's biggest polluter. They are generating 90% of their electricity from coal plants, and this is producing more than 50% of their emissions. And actually, the average temperature in South Africa are supposedly rising twice as fast as globally. And that for me is a message for all the African and African leaders who are thinking that Africa should be allowed to grow fast on fossil fuel and just worry about the consequences later. You can see that a country like South Africa running very high on fossil fuel and experiencing challenging consequences locally. So please do pay attention. So what are we talking about here? We're talking about heat wave, drought, wildfire, and freshwater shortages that are very common in the country. And you know, from just looking at wealthy nation, dealing with all those challenges is very, very costly. So you want to avoid that. However, it's also fair to say that for countries like South Africa that are coal dependent, especially in the middle of the COVID-19 pandemic, there needs to be a special attention to help them navigate those problems they are facing and see how can special support can be put together to take them to the right path. And that's what Mr. Ramaphosa, the president of South Africa, is willing to put forward. So from African intervention at the global summit convened by President Biden, there are three things that we can keep in mind. The first thing is the continent is very much a low producer of CO2 emissions. It accounts for barely 2 to 3% of the global carbon emissions. So that's very low. The second thing is that why being a lower emitter of carbon emission, the continent is bearing the brunt, a significant part of the consequences of the climate change. Whether you are talking about drought, floods, deforestation, climate migration, climate security, or climate economic consequences with high unemployment, Africa, this wonderful continent, is clearly struggling significantly. So it's important to take that into account. And the third thing is simply that Africa should remember that she holds great assets in this fight against the climate change. Whether you are talking about the Congo rainforest that is helping to absorb CO2 emission in the atmosphere, or the central cuvette peatlands that are able to hold an important amount of carbons, storing it away from the atmosphere, right? And preventing the temperature from heating up even more. So it's important to remember that. So with those three things, it's only fair that African leaders will be asking for more financial support for wealthy nations to make sure that they can implement climate initiative, right? However, for me, it's always about also taking action even with the limited resources that you have. So I clearly will advise each of the African leaders to look at how they are already implementing in their domestic policies, programs, projects that will make sure that we can win this fight. It's only to this point that they will be credible on the global environment and on the global stage. For us, renewables in Africa, okay, I'm not the head of state. Not yet. But we consider ourselves as part of the industry leaders with all due respect. So what are we doing? It's very simple. As you know, we're providing clean energy solutions to businesses by helping them to reduce their energy costs, stabilizing their power that they are receiving, and also decarbonizing their operation. So my question to you is, what are you doing? Yes, you. Because it comes of each of us to be able to take action. It's only to this point that we're going to make sure that we can reach this objective of limiting the temperature rise to 1.5 degree centigrade. This is Tony Tio from Renewables in Africa, and it was a great pleasure for me to talk to you. But in between, all I have to say is, may the sun be with you, my friend. Good better.